Welcome to our immigration podcast. We do all things immigration in the United States, and we do it every week here for you. This week, we're going to cover a couple of topics. Number one, the biggest news is the automatic extension on the EAD. We'll get into that. We're also going to talk about a recent lawsuit showing that the U.S. government has not really followed through on some of the really good programs for employer-based visas. We've also got a story for you about the U.S. government numbers that came out for the visas given out last year. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about F1 student visas and some of the questions that you guys have. If you enjoy our content, we'd always love a subscribe, a like, or forward, or just leave a comment down below. We tend to respond to the comments and do videos about the subject matter that matters to you guys, our viewers. We're here to help, and we do this for you, so anything you do that indicates what you like helps us out quite a bit. All right, let's get into it. So the biggest news that came out literally this morning and is going to really affect a lot of people is finally USCIS opted for a new extension period for EADs. Let's get into it. An EAD is a work permission, typically comes for spouses of H-4, the H-4 EAD we call it, Employment Authorization Document. It comes for E-2s and L-1 spouses as well. But aside from that, it comes in a lot of other programs, in marriage-based cases, in I-751s, well, not I-751s, but in asylum and other cases, okay? And the EAD has been backlogged. So during the Trump administration, we ran into a couple problems. Number one was a biometric. Number two was cancellation of some printing contracts, and of course, the loss of a lot of employees during a high filing period. In the end, work permits are backlogged some 13 months, and this problem has not been solved. USCIS announced that they will do a 540-day automatic extension for individuals who are waiting for their green card to arrive. Now, this 540-day extension is exactly what we need. It is going to apply to people who had the 180-day extension, and it is for people who have filed for a renewal of a work permit and are waiting for it to arrive. Now, 540 days, it's a lot of days. It's more than a year. And the goal I think that USCIS has is to cover the time period of EAD processing and then some. EAD processing is somewhere in the range of 13 months. We've seen them coming in at 8 or 9 months, but generally we're seeing 12 plus months. And especially over the last year and a half or 2 years, we've seen that very long time period. This 540 days is really, really good news. I know my clients are very happy about it, very happy for it, because losing your job when you don't have an EAD is probably the worst way to go. And it really puts the focus on the spotlight on USCIS. They're the ones who have failed with their policies. 540 days, great new program. We're very excited about it. Moving on to another story. Essentially, this is a story about government accountability, okay? United States government is accountable to the people, it's accountable to the public, especially stakeholders who are looking to make more efficiencies or push the government in specific directions. Immigration had a known employer program. Now, this program ended in 2020, and it was a trial program designed to assist employers who filed lots of immigration cases. Essentially, it was a database. Employers would send their documents and lock them in there. Statements of, articles of incorporation, statements of information, any kind of licenses, stock agreements, purchase agreements, documents that sometimes need to be included in an H-1B or an L-1 or an E-2 could be put into this database and left. What we've got right now is a total lack of government accountability. The program ended in December 2020. They were going to publish results from that, and they published nothing. In fact, they've just said we're not going to give any information from the program. Now, this program actually had a real value. There are many companies, clients of mine, who submit 100 pages every time they submit a document, a filing. This would save countless amount of time. It would save money. It would create efficiencies inside immigration where officers don't have to page through so many pages. It would change the cost of mailing. This is the kind of thing that you look at an operation and you say, how do we change it? How do we make it more efficient? Government's not going to tell us anything about it. They've closed the program. So the Americans for Prosperity, an organization, I don't know anything about them, have filed a lawsuit about this. And they're saying, we need to know what happened. We need to know what's going on. I believe in these kind of things. They matter to me because I've done immigration for more than 20 years. And I know it's bureaucratically inefficient. And I know it's slow to change. But when we get programs like this, we need to see changes happen. We'll update you more on this story because literally it matters that USCIS adopts new programs or changes how they operate or becomes more flexible or more understanding. If you do anything with immigration, you would understand exactly what I'm talking about, because immigration can be very, very frustrating. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about the green card debacle of the last year. As you know, USCIS has failed to follow through on the green cards that are allotted every year. In fact, last year, the government only gave out 195,000 green cards out of the 262,000 available. That means there were about 67,000 green cards wasted. 66,781 is the number we've got, okay? Now, wasting green cards is a huge problem because specifically people are waiting in line, number one. Number two, there are employees out there working here years and years and years. At the current count, immigration, we're looking at almost 11.5 years beyond what is normal for Indian immigrants in EB2 and EB3. The problem that we have is, number one, USCIS did not give out the full allotment they're allowed to. We did mention in our last podcast about some programs aimed at targeting to capture those 67,000 and use them again. That is one solution. The other solution is obviously to use the green cards. Now, what comes from this lack of use is another piece of information, and that is the per country cap limitations. 7% of all green cards can be allotted to each country, and that is it, no more, no less. Because of these country caps, Indian nationals, who have a highest amount of immigrants coming now in the employment categories with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, have the longest waiting period. And the simple fact is that when we actually get to add back lost green cards, those Indian immigrants get to jump in the line and get more for them. The way the system works today, the green cards that are given out today, every country can wait in line and far past Indians who stay in line for more than 10 years. Sometimes it's in the 15-year mark. I have seen cases that long. At this point, immigration needs to make a fix. And when you look at how all these green cards are given out, the percentages and how they're used, we'll put a chart up for you. You're going to see that green cards are wasted, and we have an unfair imbalance targeting specific countries that are immigrating to the United States. This, I fear, is going to keep going until we get something like the Jumpstart Act through that can change some of what's happening. Take a look at the chart that we put up. It'll show you how this data breaks down, and frankly, it's time for a change. All right, this last story is a little bit about the F1 student visas and some of the things I've come across in my conversations with students. Number one, it's about how do you pick your major? All right, those of us who already finished college, been through it, we already know, you find things that you're passionate about, that you enjoy, and you do it. But what we're looking at now is a rapidly changing job market. We're looking at huge job vacancies. We look at high demand in the United States for certain kinds of jobs. And what I like to tell students is you've got to pick something that has your interest or your passion. You can't simply take a major because you believe it'll make you a lot of money. What you need to do is marry or match your passion and your interest to something that has a career attached to it. What I mean by that is go look at professions that have high demand. Look at the pathway to that profession, and then imagine if that's going to work for you. This is the advice I've been giving students for years, and I'll never forget the story I told to a client of mine where he was working in a skateboard shop, but he liked graphic design, and we had done some E2s for that skateboard shop because they used to ship back and forth between some Asian countries. In any case, he ended up calling me one day saying, "What should I do?" I said, "Go do what you want to do. Get a master's degree in a field you like." He chose graphic design. He got a master's degree in graphic design. And he called me 2 years later and said, "Remember, you told me to go get a degree." Well, he ended up with a master's degree in graphic design. He ended up being in movie making and filmmaking, got hired by a studio where he works on films for a certain kind of CGI graphics. That's a story that I tell to a lot of people simply because it was somebody who looked at his life and knew he liked something, was good at it, but also knew there was a good upside and good potential to earn money. So for that, I would just put that out there for you. If you're an F1 student looking to do something that's going to earn you a living, try and match your passion with a high demand job industry. Maybe that'll work for you. We've got questions. All right, can my spouse work on H4 EAD if I am on an H1B? All right, it's a real simple question. If you have an H1B, your spouse is entitled to an H4 EAD only when you have an I-140 approved. So that means a perm has been filed, labor certification has been approved. You file an I-140, it's been approved. At that moment in time, your wife is eligible, your spouse is eligible for an H-4 EAD, husband or wife, okay? So keep in mind, you're looking for the PERM process and the I-140 approval to be eligible for the H-4 EAD. All right, another question here. My brother has a third-degree felony on his record for drug conviction in 98. He's got a voluntary departure and went home. Is there any waiver he can apply for? All right, so first and foremost, drug convictions fall into what's called controlled substances portion of the Immigration and Nationality Act, and there's two different provisions. One is for drug trafficking, or the sale, commercial sale of drugs, versus drug possession. And this is going to be exceptionally important for your brother. What it depends on is whether he was convicted of trafficking or not, simple possession. The reason that matters is because in immigration law, there's high categories of crimes that are called aggravated felonies, and a drug trafficking conviction is an aggravated felony, and there is pretty much no waiver for that. Okay, it's very hard to waive. If there was a simple possession, then there's a lot that can be done. With 1998 being your benchmark, there's a couple things. First of all, if he was a green card holder, that means if he had residence, there was a law called 212C that helped waive drug crimes. If not, we'd be looking at something like in 1998, they still had Federal First Offenders Act, FFOA, Federal First Offenders Act. That ended around 2012, 2011, I think, June 2011. But before that, cases that had a drug conviction for simple possession may have been eligible to wipe it away under Federal First Offender Act. Finally, there's a possibility for some crimes to be waived under 212H. 212H is an actual waiver, and there is a 212H provision for crimes that are 15 years old or older. There's also simply simple possession of marijuana that is waived under 212H. There are some ways to waive it, okay? That's just a litany or a list just off the top of my head. The key is going to be the conviction record, number one, and possibly getting post-conviction relief, something that you and your brother should discuss with an attorney. There may be some opportunities for him to get a waiver. Now, I have a final answer to that question that I want to tell you. Once you're outside the United States and you have any kind of crime, there's a huge element of discretion. That means that the officer who gives a visa or a green card or anything, they have discretion. And if they believe that somebody lived illegally in the United States and that person actually broke a bunch of laws, and we have a drug conviction, it's highly likely they might not get another visa or another green card, okay? And this is the advice I tell people. You know, you can clean everything up, but it's still going to come down to a little bit of luck at the end, depending on how strong your case is, how much you can advocate, and what that officer ends up thinking at that interview at the very end. All right, that's it for us today this week. Went pretty fast, hit a couple of major topics, the H-4 EAD being the biggest one. You guys got questions and comments, leave them down below. We're here for you. Love making our content. Thanks for watching us to the very end. Take care. Bye.